In the ancient city of Colossae lived a man named Philemon, a respected leader and believer in Christ. He was known throughout his community for his wisdom, generosity, and faith, earning him great respect among the early Christian community. As a wealthy landowner, Philemon held influence and was a pillar in the local church. He hosted gatherings for prayer, teaching, and worship, opening his home to fellow believers. His household was marked by the love and hospitality he freely extended to all who visited. Among his many servants was a young man named Onesimus. Onesimus had come into Philemon's household as a servant, yet he carried with him a burden of resentment and restlessness. Life as a servant was difficult, and Onesimus longed for freedom from his duties and obligations. Driven by this desire for independence, he eventually stole a valuable item from Philemon's home and fled to Rome, hoping to disappear into the crowds of the great city and escape the consequences of his actions. As Onesimus arrived in Rome, he was filled with both fear and excitement. He hoped for a new beginning, far from Colossae and the life he had left behind. But fate took an unexpected turn. In the bustling city, he encountered Paul, the apostle. Paul was a prisoner in Rome at the time, but even under confinement, his reputation had spread throughout the city. Onesimus, seeking shelter and perhaps sensing something different in the presence of this humble yet powerful man of God, came to Paul. Through their conversations, Onesimus began to open his heart to the gospel. Paul shared the message of Jesus' love, forgiveness, and redemption, and soon, the seed of faith was planted in Onesimus' heart. Onesimus' life began to transform as he embraced the teachings of Christ. The resentment that once fueled his actions softened, replaced by a growing sense of peace and purpose. In the weeks that followed, he stayed with Paul, assisting him in his ministry and learning more about the new life to which he was called. But there was one thing that lingered in his conscience: the theft from Philemon. Paul, discerning the unease within Onesimus, encouraged him to face his past, however painful it might be. Onesimus was hesitant, afraid of what Philemon might do if he returned. But Paul assured him that forgiveness and reconciliation were at the heart of the gospel. Paul decided to write a letter to Philemon, appealing to his faith and kindness. In his letter, Paul reminded Philemon of their shared bond in Christ, expressing his love and gratitude for Philemon's support in the ministry. Paul then brought up Onesimus. He spoke of Onesimus not as a mere servant, but as a beloved brother in Christ. He urged Philemon to welcome Onesimus back, not as a servant, but as a fellow believer. With the letter in hand, Onesimus began the journey back to Colossae, uncertain of what awaited him. He traveled with Tychicus, a trusted messenger of Paul, who offered him companionship and encouragement along the way. As he approached his former master's home, Onesimus felt the weight of his guilt return. Yet, he also carried the hope that the message of forgiveness Paul had shared would hold true. When Onesimus arrived at Philemon's home, Philemon was surprised to see him. The sight of his former servant stirred up a mix of emotions: anger at the betrayal, sadness at the loss, and curiosity about his unexpected return. Philemon noticed that Onesimus was not the same person who had left him. The young man before him had a new look of humility and peace. Philemon opened Paul's letter, reading each word with care. The letter began with Paul's warm greetings and appreciation for Philemon's faith. Paul spoke of the joy and encouragement Philemon had brought to the church, reminding him of their shared commitment to the gospel. Then came the request. Paul appealed to Philemon's love and faith, asking him to forgive Onesimus and receive him not merely as a servant, but as a beloved brother. Philemon's heart was moved by Paul's words. He had always held great respect for Paul and his teachings, and now he was faced with a call to live out those teachings in a profound way. Philemon reflected on the forgiveness he had received from Christ, and he knew that he was called to extend that same grace to others. He felt a sense of peace and resolve as he looked at Onesimus, recognizing the transformative power of God's love in the young man standing before him. Philemon extended his hand to Onesimus, welcoming him back not as a servant, but as a brother. The tension of the past dissolved in a moment of of genuine forgiveness and reconciliation. The two men embraced, their bond no longer defined by social status, but by their shared faith and love in Christ. In the days that followed, Philemon and Onesimus worked together in the ministry, their relationship transformed by grace. The church in Colossae witnessed this act of forgiveness, and it became a powerful testimony of the gospel's ability to reconcile and restore. Through Paul's letter and Philemon's obedience, the message of love and forgiveness was not only spoken, but lived out, leaving a lasting impact on the community. This story of Philemon, Onesimus, and Paul serves as a reminder that true forgiveness requires humility, compassion, and a willingness to see others through the lens of grace. In the same way that Philemon forgave Onesimus, we are called to forgive those who have wronged us, trusting that God's love can bring healing and reconciliation to even the most broken relationships.